Shavua Tov, my friends. I hope you had a nice Shabbat. Today we are actually starting a new set of halachot, a new set of laws. It's very exciting. We have completed the chapters of the laws of the foundations of the Torah. And now we are about to begin the next set of laws, which is the laws which are called in Hebrew Hilchot Deot. Deot means literally ethics. So we're learning the laws of ethics, of how a person is meant to live their life and by what standard and ethic they're supposed to look at the world and set up their own lives and how to treat other people, etc. So let us begin. We're starting by chapter 1, all the way from the beginning of the laws of ethics. So in the introductory paragraph to this chapter, the Rambam tells us that these laws contain 11 mitzvot. There are 11 commandments over here, and which we will be talking about over here in this set of laws. And they are as follows. Number 1, a person must emulate God's ways. So we have to be similar to God. We have to live our lives in a similar fashion as God is. Number 2 is to cling to those who know Him, who know God, scholars, to love one's fellow man, to love a convert, that's a special mitzvah, not to hate one's brother, to rebuke, obviously in a nice way, but if you see someone doing something wrong, to tell them, to help them get to the right path, not to embarrass someone, not to oppress the unfortunate, not to gossip, not to bear vengeance, and not to bear a grudge. The explanation of these mitzvot we're going to be learning about in the following chapters of the laws of ethics. We're going to be learning all about what it means to live a good, upstanding life. So, starting and beginning with the first chapter. Each and every man, every person in this world, possesses many character traits. Every trait very different than the other. One type of man is very wrathful. He's very angry. He's always with a temper. And then there's another type of person which is the exact opposite of that, which he is like a dead body. Doesn't respond to anything. He's very, very relaxed. And he will only get upset once every couple of years. There's someone who's very prideful. And then there's someone who is very humble. There's one person who is ruled by his appetite, by what they enjoy. And that person will never be happy with what they have. But then there's someone who's very pure, the opposite. And that person will desire very little, only what the body needs. There's one person who's very greedy, who will never be satisfied by what he has. As it says, a one who loves money will never be satisfied with any amount of money. Then there is the opposite. In contrast, you have a person who, puts a check on himself. That person is very satisfied with even with just very little. There's a person who is a miser, who torments himself with hunger, and being very watchful over all his things, doesn't let anyone touch anything that belongs to him. Then there is a person who is very free, gives everyone, very, very giving. So every single trait that exists will always have the various contrasts from the far one side to the far of the total opposite. Between these two sides, these two extremes, there are obviously many intermediate points. So you can have a little bit more to one side, you can have a little bit more to the other side, or you can have the exact middle. So the Rambam tells us that whenever a person is trying to know what is the correct and what is the ethical way that a person should live their life, the Rambam tells us that we have to live in the middle way. We have to go in the middle path. Because when we are born, we have many different traits. and many different natural ways that we feel and act and do and react, and that is natural the way we are. The only thing is that we have to work on ourselves, that we shouldn't just be the way we were naturally born. That's not enough. It's not enough just to be the natural way we are, because if it were a person that was born with a very strong temper or a very big miser or whatever, so then it's not a good thing. So we have to work on ourselves, and we have to always find and see to always bring ourselves to the correct path. And the Rambam tells us that the correct path, the straight path for a person to live on, is the middle path. Not to be extremely angry and extremely temperous, but on the other hand, not to be lifeless, not to have no reaction whatsoever if someone does something wrong. So we need to have, something in between these two. And that is the middle path. That whenever there is a situation that is important that we should become upset, so we become upset. We show that we are angry. But a time when it is appropriate to hold ourselves back and not to become mad, so then that's something which is very important, to hold ourselves back. And we always have to keep on looking at ourselves and seeing and assessing ourselves to see how we are living our life. Are we just doing the natural of how we were born? And if that means that I love to eat and therefore I eat whatever I want, even if I know that it's going to hurt my health and it's going to do bad things to me, well, we always have to be assessing ourselves to see what are we doing. Are we in the middle path? Are we in the correct path? We don't starve ourselves. We just don't eat everything that we feel like. We have a middle path. And that's a very important thing. So the Rambam tells us, for example, a person, as we spoke about, a person shouldn't get very angry, but neither should he be without any feeling whatsoever. Similarly, and a person shouldn't be a miser, but he shouldn't just spread out all his money to, and not have anything left for himself. A person shouldn't be, shouldn't be overly elated and laughing and excessively too happy, never being serious, always joking. But neither should a person always be sad or depressed. So we should be happy at all times, but with a friendly countenance. And that is going to apply to every single one of our traits. This is the path of the wise person. Every person who is wise should always be assessing their traits to see that they are intermediate and they are balanced. But then the Rambam says, very interestingly, is that there is a person who carefully examines their behavior and sometimes will actually deviate slightly from the middle path and move a little bit to one of the sides. For instance, a person, so as we said, a person shouldn't be prideful, always feeling very good about himself. But on the other hand, we shouldn't just be, a threshold with everyone walking over us. The Rambam says that if you have a person who, in the right time and in the right place, obviously, but goes away from the middle path, and that feeling of pride that person has to have somewhat a sense of pride of himself, and he goes to the other extreme and to be very, very selfless, piety, so that is a very pious person. So someone who goes to the middle path is going to be the wise person. That's the right and correct path for every person. But there are sometimes certain character traits that if a person does do the extra step, so although, he's supposed to eat and he's supposed to be healthy and strong, but doesn't specifically have to have the food as tasteful as possible. You can miss out the salt, so to speak. So a pious person will elevate himself slightly from the physicality and materialism of life, and ultimately will therefore deviate to a certain extent from that middle path by being a little bit harsher on himself. And that's the level of a pious person. But the regular path for every normal person is to go in the middle path. Never too much to one extreme, and never too much to the other extreme. And the Rambam says that all of these concepts of going in the middle path, this is all the correct and right way that we should go. As it says in the verse, and you should walk in His ways, in God's ways. So this is the way we are supposed to live our life, by being similar to God. As our sages have told us, that just as God is called gracious, we should also be gracious. Just as God is called merciful, we should also be merciful. Just as God is called holy, we should also be holy. Similarly to every single trait, there are various traits that describe God. He is slow to anger, He is abundant in kindness, He is righteous, He is just, He is complete, He's powerful. All of these various traits that describe God and various actions that God does, we should always want to connect ourselves to God by following this path. So how does a person, if a person was born naturally and he's not like that, he's not a very gracious person, or they're not a very abundantly kind. So what are we supposed to do then? So how does a person work on himself to bring himself to such a place to come closer to God? So the Rambam says it's very simple. Start doing it. Do it once. Do it twice. Do it 3 times. Go against your nature. So your nature tells you, I'm not in the mood of giving charity today. I'm not in the mood of, giving up on this delicious chocolate over here. Do it once. Hold yourself back. Do it twice. Go against your nature. And ultimately, by doing one more step and one more step, the person will come to make this part of who he is. He will fix it and make it part of his personality. And a person who follows along this path, this person will bring goodness and blessing upon himself. As it says in regards to Abraham, that he was someone that went after the ways of God, and God gave to Abraham all goodness, everything that He spoke to Abraham that He will give him, because he went in the path of God. And Abraham gave this to every one of his descendants, specifically that we should all be able to follow in the path of God and be able to be all the various traits that God is, in order that we should be able to live the best possible, most ethical life that can be. And with that, we complete chapter 1. So that is chapter 1 of the laws of ethics. The Rambam is going through the various ways of how a person should live his life. It's very fascinating. And tune in over the next couple days as we continue to study of how we should all live our lives. Have a very good week, and we will be in touch tomorrow morning.